Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's Auxis Corporate Performance Series webinar. If IT got hit by a bus tomorrow, how much do you know to keep functioning? My name's Yaslin Arroyo, and I'm the moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is presented by Auxis. Auxis is a unique consulting and outsourcing firm comprised of former industry professionals who don't act like traditional consultants. Offering a customized real-world results-oriented approach, we become ingrained in our clients' culture and vision and truly dedicated to their success. Our depth of experience allows us to maintain a focus on customization, flexibility, and bottom-line results at a very competitive cost structure. At this point, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, Alejandra Moreno. Alejandra Moreno is the IT Director of Infrastructure Projects in the Managed Services Division of Auxis, bringing over 25 years of experience in the information technology industry. Alejandra is an ITIL certified practitioner and has successfully led multiple client projects in the areas of network design, disaster recovery, infrastructure deployments, and ITIL assessments and process implementations. In today's webinar, she'll share her expertise on the challenges of managing knowledge. Before we begin, let me remind all participants we welcome your questions. Please submit them in your webinar panel at any time. We'll make sure to address those questions at the conclusion of the webinar. And with that, I'll turn it over to our speaker, Alejandra. Alejandra?
Thank you, Jeslyn, and many thanks to all of you for attending this webinar today. As Jeslyn indicated, my name is Alejandra Moreno. I am an IT Director at Auxis in charge of infrastructure projects, and I have worked in our managed services practice since its inception. So I have been involved in the development of our knowledge management processes as one of the key support functions of the services that we provide to all of our outsourcing clients. Some of the questions that you need to ask yourselves if you're contemplating the need of managing knowledge are the following. Are the details of how your IT is run living in other people's brains? Can you afford not to have accurate documentation of your policies, systems, standards, operations, or your procedures? Can anyone from your IT team get sick, take a vacation, or even go to training without someone having to call them each time a request for an incident comes in for something that they normally manage and nobody else knows how to handle? Hopefully today we will be able to provide you with some insight on a process that you may already be doing in an ad hoc manner, but that you may want to formalize as a standard practice in your organizations. During today's webinar, I'm going to share some basic definitions of knowledge and knowledge management and our own company experience in the implementation of this important information technology function. I want to start off with some background description and context regarding knowledge. We will review the sub-processes that compose the knowledge management function from an ITIL point of view. We will also review why systems documentation, network diagrams, standard operating procedures, process definitions are all or should all be considered assets of an IT organization and need to be treated as such. They should be developed, approved, properly stored, cataloged, distributed, protected, and archived. And we're going to go over the critical success factors of implementing knowledge management in an organization. I want to start out with some basic definitions. So data is at the lowest point of the pyramid an unstructured collection of facts and figures that may not provide any particular value add to the organization unless they're properly organized or collected, summarized. Information is the next level of the pyramid, and it's regarded as structured data, data that has already been arranged, classified, condensed somehow, and that can now be analyzed. Knowledge is defined as the next step of that pyramid as information about information. And it basically provides an interpretation of the raw data that will assist in the decision-making process of an organization. For information to become knowledge, you have to apply either internal or external experiences and ideas to this information. And we will be elaborating on the definition of knowledge in the next slide. But I just wanted to take a minute to also mention wisdom. Wisdom is the knowledge acquired over a certain period of time that allows managers to make sensible decisions that will eventually impact the organization in a positive way. So here we have expanded on multiple definitions of knowledge. There are many academics that use different criteria to classify knowledge based on the matter it is acquired, or if it's explicit, like codified knowledge, or it could be also tacit, meaning that it's experience-based knowledge. The definition that will be the focus of our webinar today and the rest of this presentation will be the organizational knowledge, the collective ability for an enterprise to preserve, store, and retrieve knowledge and information of its core business functions or core competencies and specific skills. From a management point of view, the greatest challenge with explicit knowledge involves ensuring that people have timely access to what they need, that we have that important knowledge stored, and that the knowledge is reviewed, updated, or discarded. However, much more critical is finding ways to capture and document that tacit knowledge, the experience that that our people or resources have that is not actually written out. Now that we're on the same page regarding the academic definitions of knowledge, let's take a look at how we can use this within the information technology environment context. So on this slide, you're going to see several definitions of knowledge management. But I'm going to refer to the one that's publicated, that was on a publication called Working Knowledge, How Organizations Manage What They Know by Davenport and Prusak in 2000, that states that knowledge management is managing the corporation's knowledge through a systematically and organizationally specified process for acquiring, organizing, sustaining, applying, sharing, and renewing of both the tacit and the explicit knowledge of employees to enhance organizational performance and create value for the company. Although this is not a session on IDLE, I've added a diagram depicting the IDLE processes to illustrate where knowledge management fits in the overall IT management functions framework. So I'm going to make a pause in our very specific knowledge discussion to do a high-level review of IDLE for those that are not familiar with the term. IDLE, the acronym stands for Information Technology Infrastructure Library, and it's a de facto standard for IT management and is comprised of 5 publications which define service areas in IT management. And this depiction in particular is referring to version 3 of IDLE. So the first area is service strategy, and it defines it's right there in the middle, the blue circle. It defines the processes that align IT to the business needs. Its job is to ensure that every element of the service life cycle is focused on customer outcome and relates to all of the companion process elements that follow. The rest of the service areas are going to be focused on meeting those business goals, requirements, and service management principles defined in this area of strategy. The second area is called service design. It is the red arrow that is on the top of the diagram. It basically provides guidance on the production and maintenance of IT policies, architectures, and documents for the design of appropriate and innovative IT infrastructure service solutions and processes in order to meet those current and future business requirements that were defined in the service strategy area. The important processes that comprise this area are service level management and availability management, just to mention a few. Then we see service transition, which is the blue arrow on your diagram. It provides guidance and process activities for the transition of services in the operational business environment. So it covers, some very important processes such as change management and release and deployment practices or configuration management. so that risks, benefits, delivery mechanisms, and the support of ongoing operational services are considered. Knowledge management, by the way, is a process that is included in this service area of service transition. The other areas are service operation. This is the orange arrow on the diagram. It details delivery and control activities to achieve operational excellence on a day-to-day basis. Basically, it deals with event management, incident management, and problem management. There's also an overall circle around in the diagram which corresponds to continual service improvement. And in addition to defining, the specific IT management process that are required for the delivery of consistent, repeatable process activities as part of service quality, IDLE has always emphasized the importance of continual improvements. So we said that knowledge management is included in the service transition group, and it's based on two critical activities. First one would be capturing and documenting individual explicit and tacit knowledge, and then the second one, which is, I would say, as important as the first, is the dissemination of that information within the organization. In order to achieve this effective sharing of knowledge, normally a mature organization would require the development and ongoing support, of course, of what is called a Service Knowledge Management System. Acronym is SKMS. This repository would need to be accessible to all the processes that need to obtain information. However, it can also be comprised of multiple data sources. Some service management tools already provide a knowledge management module, but we're not going to go into details of tools in today's presentation. I think that on the slide, that last item that is there is something that's really important. Many organizations consider knowledge as and manage knowledge as a configuration item, meaning that it is subject to the same processes that other configuration items are subject to, like change. So why is knowledge management useful? Well, the primary role of knowledge management is to improve the quality of decision making by ensuring that that accurate, reliable, and trustworthy information is available throughout the service life cycle. So we have here some, a list of benefits that could be used to make a business case. So I'm just going to go real quick through them. First of all, it places a focus on knowledge as an asset, and that is why I said, we treat it as a configuration item. It enables the organization to better protect what it actually knows and to improve its focus on developing efforts to match, the needs of knowledge that the environment has. It is a great way to learn from past mistakes and make sure that they are not repeated, as well as successes. It promotes a focus on developing the right competencies and skills. It enhances the firm's ability to innovate, and this, of course, is at the top of the maturity level of knowledge management. And it enhances the firm's ability to protect the knowledge and, in some cases, competencies from either being lost or copied or just having them walk away of the organization. Now, the implementation of knowledge management as defined by the IDLE framework has 5 main phases. These phases and activities should not be confused with the definition of the knowledge management process itself, which we'll review in the next slide. During the strategy phase, the organization will build a business case to be presented to the executive management, defining the vision, or in other words, the reasons why the company is implementing this IT management process, including benefits that are expected to be attained. Next is the planning phase. In this phase, the governance structure and the knowledge management processes are defined, including identifying roles and skill sets that are required, as well as any compliance or audit requirement that the organization may have. So, specific audit controls or regulating agency constraints. During the design phase, the organization will define what will be considered as a knowledge asset, and the structure of how the organization will be storing and organizing the knowledge. One of the most important steps in this phase will also be the definition of how the organization will measure measure the performance of knowledge management by identifying the key performance indicators that it will be tracking. Once the design is ready, the organization will move on to the actual implementation phase, where the specific procedures and guidelines are put into place and the initial upload of knowledge is carried out. The operating phase is a continuous phase that will maintain the knowledge base, measure the effectiveness of the management process by using the KPIs that were defined during the design phase, and continue to update and enhance the process as required. We're now going to take a look at a typical knowledge management process diagram. So this is an example of a knowledge management process cycle model. In this case, we took this from a publication from Evans, Dalker, and Bidian in 2014. The specific process defined during the implementation of a knowledge management practice may vary depending on the organization and its requirements, so this is just a sample. A knowledge request, which is the first box at the left, may be triggered for numerous reasons, right? Some of which may include a strategic or operational problem solving, some decision making that has to happen, a knowledge gap analysis, or even innovation. When a request for knowledge is made, the searcher must identify if the appropriate knowledge already exists in-house, or if appropriate knowledge assets need to be created or acquired from a third-party vendor. Let's review the identity step. It involves identifying codified knowledge assets that can fulfill the request made, right? So for example, documents in an electronic or printed format that are stored in a knowledge repository. The frequency or use of specific assets may be followed or tracked to provide KPIs on general metrics to include accuracy, currency, credibility, and value to the organization of a particular knowledge asset. On the other hand, a knowledge request may trigger the need for new knowledge assets to be created if none are found through the search of or in the identify stage. New knowledge assets may also need to be created if existing knowledge assets only partially satisfy the knowledge needs. The definition of the process should include triggers that initiate this creation. So if no asset is found that satisfies the request, the original process that activated this knowledge request will not receive a solution. Continuing with the steps for failed knowledge request outcome. So for example, triggering the escalation of a ticket to a higher level technician. I hope you all followed me through that because that is important, right? So I may trigger the request for knowledge from an incident ticket. I search for the knowledge, the particular knowledge. I do not find it. Therefore, two activities or two action items should be taken out of that. One would be to escalate to the appropriate escalation level to fulfill the incident, and then the second might trigger the creation or the need to analyze, the need of a new knowledge asset. The store step, once the knowledge has been deemed valuable to the organization based on the analysis and the assessment and the identify and create phases, it is stored as an active component of our organizational memory. In other words, a knowledge asset as we've been mentioning it. However, the repository cannot be a random collection of knowledge assets regardless of their individual or collective value. We need to have them stored in a structured way that will allow them to be efficiently manipulated, retrieved, and eventually shared. So common related activities during the store step include meta tagging, use of templates, classifying, linking, which could also be mentioned in some academic circles as cross-referencing, and optimizing search and retrieval. Once the knowledge assets are part of the knowledge base, they can be retrieved from the organizational memory to be shared, which is the next step, and means to be disseminated or communicated both internally and externally. The timing and frequency of sharing can either be pre-established, for example, immediately following new or updated knowledge asset that has been stored, similar to a push approach. Or it can also be disseminated in an ad hoc fashion based on the immediate need, what some would call a pull approach. But the process through which this knowledge is shared is very important, because sometimes the audience for which the knowledge is intended may not be aware of its existence, particularly when new knowledge is created and stored. So having an explicit, dynamic, and flexible network of expertise fosters collaboration and can greatly assist in the sharing of organizational knowledge assets. Normally what we do to make sure that we do disseminate properly is that we internally communicate to our different teams when new knowledge has been pushed to the database. There are more tacit forms of sharing knowledge that may be encouraged through coaching or mentoring programs if these are formally or maybe informally part of an organization's definition of knowledge management. This is definitely dependent on the knowledge management maturity of the organization. The more mature the organization, the more efficient is going to be the medium and more timely that sharing of the knowledge. In a more sophisticated environment, common technologies used to share knowledge assets may include communication and collaboration technologies and many other customer relationship, supply chain management, or even decision support systems. Once shared, knowledge assets can be activated or put to use, which is the next step in the process. Their value can be extracted and applied throughout the organization to solve problems, make decisions, improve efficiencies, or promote innovative thinking. The knowledge assets that have been shared and used in previous phases can also be used as the foundation for creating or refining existing knowledge assets. The use of knowledge, particularly in situations where experts provide a contextual understanding, leads to employees gaining experience as they interpret the impact of that knowledge on their work environment. Some of the more common activities that assist in the learn stage include benchmarking, doing sessions for best practices and lessons learned, and knowledge gap analysis. We're now down to the improve step. So the learning that takes place in the previous phase leads to further refinement of knowledge assets. Either new value is identified or created for them, and additions or updates can be made to keep them current in the organizational to the organizational context. In the knowledge management cycle, improve is the decision point for knowledge assets also to be archived, retired, or transferred outside the organization for future use. This is a very important step, because if you don't retire obsolete knowledge, it can become unmanageable. We're going to talk now a little bit about the maturity of the knowledge management process. So the development model defines 5 maturity levels and provides information on how to make the next reasonable step in a knowledge management development or implementation. These maturity levels were inspired by the CMM levels, if you all are familiar with that. We're talking about the Capability Maturity Model from the Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. And they have thematically been worked out for knowledge management in this case. So level 1 is the initial stage of growing awareness. As this ad hoc knowledge becomes more prevalent, we move up to level 2, where the organization starts to develop repeatable practices. This eventually leads through applied knowledge to level 3, where we define defined processes, formalized processes. As the organization continues to mature its knowledge management practice, we move up to level 4, where knowledge is being measured. Finally, we find level 5, where the process is optimized, and we identify more complex knowledge management, such as innovation through dynamic knowledge. We're not going to go into that it's an area of study that's really fascinating, but we're not going to touch it in this webinar. So now that we've talked about knowledge management for a while, I want to discuss critical success factors. And I know that we've already touched on many of these items, but let's just go through them explicitly. So knowledge leadership, we need to make sure, as in any other implementation project, that executive management has bought in to the promotion and development of knowledge as a practice within the business. For that, we need to define clear business benefits. This is going to help with the business case and making sure that we track success and develop measurements for the practice. Defining systematic processes, including knowledge mapping and process documentation, of course, is critical to the success. Knowledge sharing culture and fostering teams that work amongst themselves is extremely important, and we're going to touch on this a little bit more later on. We talked before about how knowledge assets should be treated as a configuration item, and as such should be subject to change management, so that we have a mechanism to formalize updates and approve knowledge. We need to understand, how the knowledge would be approved when it is considered a formal and acknowledged method of doing something within the company. And we also need to make sure that we document the approvals that led to this update. Normally what we do internally is we have a record of changes on the same document that just, we keep adding new entries on it as the document goes through different stages or gets updates. Continuous learning, that is important, I would say, not only for knowledge management, but for developing the skill set of any organization, and we can do this through pilots and learning networks in addition to formalized educational plans. We need to have an effective information and communications infrastructure. So not everybody is going to be able to have, due to budget constraints and cost issues, a SKMS, a tool just dedicated to the management of knowledge. But there are other groupware and collaborative technologies that we can leverage for knowledge management, as long as we have a good process in place that indicates univocally how that knowledge is uploaded, approved, and posted, and then used. We've gone through the critical success factors, but one thing that is also important, because as much as telling you what to do is important, reviewing what not to do is also very valuable. Discovering when and why inquiries fail, because these failures provide the greatest opportunity for improving an overall experience. So an academic called Alan Frost defined causal failure factors that refer to fundamental problems within the organization that then leads to conditions that are not suitable for the development of knowledge management. They are not always easily visible, and they lead to a number of symptoms, which he has also defined and are depicted here as the resultant factors. The causal failure factors are pretty much the opposite of the critical success factors that we just saw, right? So some of them are the lack of performance indicators and the ability to measure the benefits, inadequate management support, not having a champion within the organization that is leading the knowledge management effort, improper planning, design, coordination, or evaluation, having an inadequate skill of knowledge managers and workers may lead to failure. In our case, we have a team of technical writers to ensure that they apply their specific processes and techniques to the capture and storage of knowledge. Problems with organizational culture or an improper organizational structure can also lead to some failure factors. One thing that I wanted to mention, and it's typical of a very technical organization, is that engineers, for the most part, tend to be very isolated. They like to work by themselves. They don't like to share. In some cases, they're afraid of losing their job advantage if they share all the information that they have. So you have to find ways within the organizational culture to overcome those situations and foster this culture of sharing. The resultant failure factors can then be lack of widespread contribution to your knowledge base, lack of relevance, quality, or usability of the knowledge assets that you have, of the actual content of the knowledge base, improper implementation of technology that makes managing the knowledge a daunting task or very inefficient. Improper budgeting and excessive costs that can be probably applied to any, as a result of failure factor for any IT project. Lack of responsibility and ownership, and loss of knowledge from staff defection and retirement if we're not able to capture that knowledge in a timely manner. The knowledge management process should also promote the creation of content as a byproduct of solving problems. So, for example, documenting known errors or workarounds in the problem management process, or evolving content based on demand and usage. Remember, for this to be effective, you actually have to have measurements in place. Here at Auxis, our infrastructure devices and applications configurations are part of our configuration management process. However, sometimes you also want to capture the details of how they were configured or what issues needed to be overcome, or even the reasons why a particular configuration was used. I'm pretty sure that you have all gone through the experience of something being configured in a way that was not default, not standard, and you tried and was configured by somebody that's many moons gone, and when you're restructuring the application or the systems, you come back and you try to make that default only to see that it fails, and there was an underlying reason why the non-default configuration was made, but nobody documented it. So that's why infrastructure and application configuration documents are considered knowledge within Auxis. We're really big on standard operating procedures. Anything that follows a step-by-step instruction set gets documented as an SOP within Auxis. Of course, this also includes all of our idle process definitions and our procedures on how the processes are implemented on the specific tools that we use for IT management. We also document our clients' contacts as knowledge, their phone numbers, locations, roles, hours of operations, org charts, and things like specific instructions for escalations. When doing this, all you need to be is very cognizant of the fact that you only want one single source to be the master. So you may need to implement mechanisms that link or import the information from other tools like customer relationship management system, global address lists, etc. One very interesting object that I would like to mention are knowledge trees. Some tools provide mechanisms to document a path to a particular knowledge asset. When you have a large knowledge base, the use of knowledge trees is really efficient in assisting the knowledge requester in finding the right document. So the knowledge tree basically consists in a series of questions and forks that lead you to documents or knowledge assets at the leaves of that tree. want to take a little bit of time here now to discuss our experiences with best practices. And I wanted to mention a research called Investigation of Environmental Factors Influencing Knowledge Transfer that was published in the Journal of Knowledge Management Practice in August of 2002. Basically, the research consisted that there was a question that was asked, and the question is there a correlation between organizational culture and the ability of that organization to efficiently and effectively transfer knowledge? In this research, they surveyed over 1,000 people in 23 organizations from the United States Air Force using an instrument that assessed organizational culture and factors known to influence knowledge transfer efficiency. They found evidence that organizations with a culture of openness to change and innovation, as well as a task-centered orientation, tended to be conducive to knowledge transfer. On the other hand, they found evidence that organizations that exhibit a confrontational and competitive orientation tended not to be as conducive to knowledge transfer. So it is important to make the knowledge management process a part of the culture of the company. Social networking can serve as a valuable tool in encouraging unstructured type of knowledge development. By embracing social networking as part of your knowledge management strategy, you can facilitate rapid, low-cost content development through customer communities that support themselves, while also contributing content that then can be incorporated into your knowledge base. And typical examples are blogs or wiki sites. Collaboration tools like the new SharePoint versions are offering a much tighter integration with social networking tools that we can use to advance knowledge management. Let's see the things that we haven't talked regarding best practices. So something that's really important is to focus on the process and not the tool. Having a great tool is, of course, the ideal situation, but much more important than the tool is the actual process. So make sure that you document the process well, and then regardless of the tool that you use, you can adapt the procedures to the specific tools that you have or don't have, but the actual process itself is what really can make or break the deal. Measure the consequences of technology use means that in some cases the implementation of a new methodology, new process, or a new tool can, in the early stages, create a detriment to the time frame that you use for your response times. What this means is if your teams do not currently use knowledge and you introduce knowledge management, you need to account for a learning curve where in the initial stages, having the experience to go and search through the knowledge, the end time goal is to actually be able to provide the end user with a much quicker result. But in the beginning stages, that introduction of technology may cause a little bit of a backlash, so be prepared for that. Remember also to use the 80-20 rule. Normally 80% of your issues are going to be resolved with 20% of the knowledge that you develop. Of course, we recommend the use of specialized skills. As I said, we use very specific technical writers within our organization. Monitor performance, analyze results for continuous improvement, make sure that you're measuring the right things, and that you use that feedback to retrofit your process. I can't stress the importance of knowledge relevance and making sure that you have a process in place to archive obsolete knowledge. Some more tactical best practices or recommendations that we have is do not use specific resource names or phone numbers, or even specific server host names within your documentation. Try to make it as generic as possible. You reference roles because people change. So if every time you're going to need to modify an escalation, if every time somebody changes work or the role within the organization, you're going to have to update 100 documents, then that's not very efficient. We've learned to use roles. This way, you just change the source information in the contact list, and you're good to go. And then the last recommendation that I'm going to give out is make sure that you have a schedule to update the content. And updating may just be to review the content, making sure that it is relevant, making sure that you're not referencing an application that has been retired, something that is no longer valid. So what we do is, depending on the type of standard operating procedure, we have at least a 1-year cycle to review all of our SOPs, but depending on the type of document or knowledge asset that you have, you might use a twice a year or a quarterly review of those assets. I don't have anything else in my presentation today, but we're going to open it now for questions, if anybody has any question.
Alejandra, we have a question here or a comment from one of our participants. It would be helpful if you provide some examples of a typical business case.
Well, a business case is really something that's going to be very, very particular to your particular organization. But for example, if you can do some analysis of the time, if you're currently measuring your operations, you'll have a lot more value to offer. So if you can make a case for saying, for example, the time that you're taking in resolving simple issues, because the majority of the incidents or requests has to be escalated to higher levels of the organization, then you can say, if we have a way to document and consistently store and manage knowledge, we can produce, we can have a more efficient operation, which could mean lowering number of resources required, or more importantly, dedicating skilled workers to more innovative and forwarding the infrastructure, or making changes to the infrastructure that will provide additional benefits to the organization, instead of doing repetitive work that can be pushed to lower levels of skilled workers. So I would definitely recommend that you use numbers in a business case regarding number of incidents, number of escalations, and total number of resources.
Thank you, Alejandra. We also have another question. The question is, can you give us an idea of the volume of information that you currently manage as knowledge as a managed services provider?
So I don't have the number in terabytes, but I can tell you that we probably manage some 300 SOPs for some 20 plus clients. We constantly are in a cycle of reviewing and archiving, so I would say that probably the volume of updates or transition of new knowledge assets and retirement of knowledge assets is probably in the range of 25 to 30 per month, but the number is probably around 300. That is in regards to what we call SOPs, which are standard operating procedures. But in addition to that, we have a vast amount of information that we regard as knowledge for infrastructure configuration, for network diagrams, for process diagrams. So I would say that in numbers we probably have another 2 to 250 documents for those types of knowledge assets.
Okay, thank you, Alejandra. We have another question here. What tool do you use for knowledge management? We internally we use a CA service desk as our service desk management tool. However, even though that tool has a knowledge management module, we pretty much in an ad hoc manner we started using SharePoint as a collaboration tool, and we actually transferred all of our knowledge assets into SharePoint. It has been a great experience for us. As I said, the new versions of SharePoint are coming out now with more social networking, internal social networking embedded into the application. And it really fosters collaboration. We see ourselves using even more SharePoint. The backlash there, of course, is the lack of integration with our service desk management system. So we do continuously monitor that interaction between the two. Because the agents do need to move from one to another, but we overcome that by, very clearly defining in our processes, when and how they need to move from one tool to the other. Great, thank you, Alejandra. It looks like there are no other questions.
Right. So you will be able to download the presentation from our website as soon as it's posted. I just wanted to end saying that Auxis is a managed services provider, and we have a lot of experience in the implementation of IDLE. My email and phone number are on the screen. Please feel free to contact me with any questions that you may have on the topic, or if you're interested in discussing how we may be of service to you and your company.
Great. Thank you, Alejandra, and to all of our participants for joining us today. Please watch for our follow-up email with the replay link along with a copy of this presentation. And also, if you would please take a moment to complete our brief exit survey, we'd appreciate it. And on behalf of Alejandra and the Auxis team, thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.